Vancouver City Hall is under the microscope tonight after Global News uncovered a serious discrepancy in a development deal.
No one seemed to notice an error that shortchanged taxpayers by $1.5 million. Here's what happened when reporter Tanya Beja started asking questions.
The Charleston markets itself as an exclusive residence, the mixed condo and rental project subsidized by taxpayers without their knowledge or City Council's consent.
I'm astonished. That shouldn't, I don't understand how that could happen.
When the Onni Group applied to the city for rezoning, developers weren't looking for any financial incentives.
In the situation, it is market rental housing. It's not coming in under any incentive programs.
The city's Rental 100 program offers builders waivers on their construction levies, or DCLs, if their residential project is entirely rental. Onni's included strata condos, so didn't qualify. But Global News obtained 2 city reports showing Onni got a big break. Their Richard Street development was granted a $1.5 million waiver, the second largest in the program's history.
To hear that there was a waiver given in a building that isn't actually Rental 100 is disappointing, to say the least.
We asked the city manager to explain. Today he admitted the city mishandled the money.
It was a simple mistake. The project, as you said, was not eligible for a waiver, and we weren't intending to give it a waiver, and there was a miscommunication amongst our staff. With you bringing this to light, we've been in touch with the developer this morning, and they have agreed to pay back the amount that was missed.
In a statement, Onni says this matter regarding the DCL payment has recently been brought to our attention, and we are currently considering it. Should there be an error, we will rectify immediately. Multiple staffers had to sign off on the deal before the waiver was granted.
How can you explain how 5 or 6 people would have not caught this error?
Yeah, that's what we're doing right now is going back to look at all of the emails, the forms, the communications to understand where that slip-up might have happened.
Calls now for an investigation.
If the city gave a waiver of $1.5 million when it shouldn't have, I think there needs to be a full inquiry into how something like that could happen, because that's a lot of money.
It was very surprising. I can't. I've been in council for about 8 years now. I can't remember a similar case ever, and I haven't heard of any. So it's very unusual. I'm glad that it's been daylighted, and I'm glad that the city manager is investigating to see if other errors of this type have been made.
More tonight on a mistake at Vancouver City Hall that cost taxpayers $1.5 million.
Our Tanya Beja had the exclusive last night. The city says it made a mistake granting developer Onni a waiver for their Richard Street development, a waiver it didn't qualify for. John Hua picks up the story for us tonight. And John, you went in search of more answers today as to how this could have been missed.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone complains about bureaucratic red tape, but despite all of those checks and balances, the City of Vancouver says this $1.5 million mistake may have happened after all of those approvals. Projects this big come down to the smallest details. A $1.5 million mistake, a pretty big one to miss.
Such big money, they can say, I don't know, that's it. How can you say I don't know?
I'm not quite sure how that could really happen in this day and age.
With the amount of money that was involved, and the developer, they know what they're doing.
The missing cash came in the form of a major break on Onni's development cost levy. Problem is, only 100% rental buildings can benefit. The developer did not apply for it, council didn't approve it, but the mixed-use project at 1396 Richard Street got it anyways.
Someone at some level must have known.
Well, let's start with the developer that didn't notice a $1.5 million bill missing in the mail. Onni says it's looking into it and will rectify the situation if a mistake was made. When we asked for an update,
we don't have anyone that we can really put on camera at the moment.
You don't have anyone who kind of deals with their
unfortunately not.
According to city documents, decisions like this have to go through several departments for approval, starting at development services, then real estate. After that, combined approval from planning and community services, and on top of all that, a final rubber stamp from the city manager. After all of those checks and balances, the city believes that's when the mistake was made.
They are, I think, pushing the envelope too far and working with developers with taxpayers' money.
A day after thanking Global News for raising the issue, the City of Vancouver refusing to put anyone on camera, While the city blames it on a clerical error, the motivation behind it is still unclear.
I think it calls for a full investigation, not by the city, but by the RCMP and the provincial government.
For now, Vancouver's chief risk officer is the one who will be conducting a full review.
Earlier this week, Global News uncovered a $1.5 million error at Vancouver City Hall involving a building waiver mistakenly given to developer Onni. Well, tonight, some good news for taxpayers. Tanya Beja first broke this story, and she joins us now live. And Tanya, it garnered a huge response, and tonight we can report the money is back where it belongs.
That's right, Chris. Today, Onni got in touch with me to say they would repay the $1.55 million to City Hall. Just to bring everyone up to speed, Global News obtained 2 reports showing that Onni received a $1.5 million waiver from the city for its Richard Street development. The waiver was issued through the city's Rental 100 program, which requires that residential properties be 100% rental to qualify. But in Onni's case, the project was not. And when Global News started asking questions, the city admitted it made a mistake. While Onni has not gone on camera today, the company sent me this response. The error identified by Global was brought to the city's attention, and since then we have worked with the city to understand and verify everything. Payment is being delivered to the city this morning.
Vancouver is facing a housing crisis. The city's solution: give developers financial incentives to build affordable market rentals. But tenants say the program is backfiring at their expense.
Who can afford $2,500 a month for a one-bedroom apartment living down here? Not most of the people that I know.
It sure would be nice if somebody who had some power could step in and do something.
Under Vancouver's Rental 100 program, developers can avoid paying levies on a project if they build 100% rental housing. Between 2010 and 2015, the city let developers off the hook for $15 million in fees and gave them many millions more in density bonuses.
I know developers who develop rental housing in this city who are developing rental housing in Toronto with no government subsidies whatsoever. So maybe we're actually, allowing the development industry to laugh its way to the bank by giving them great breaks when they actually don't even need it.
The rentals built with government incentives are now being advertised as luxury spaces. An 800 square foot unit at the Neon, almost $3,000 a month. Some units at the Lauren even advertised on Airbnb.
Who holds them accountable? Who are they answerable to? What is the appropriate process?
That rental rate is still something that's within the budget of a mid-range of families, a lot of middle-class families who could never afford to buy a condominium.
The city did set rental limits for buildings that are now under construction, but those limits only apply to the first tenant. When their lease ends, all bets are off.
We have a housing crisis in the city of Vancouver, and the city has to make sure that it's not giving the developers everything and the citizens nothing.
Vision councillors say the program fills a desperate shortage in Vancouver's rental stock.
From a point at which we had almost no rental being built 5 or 6 years ago or 7 years ago, we're now getting 1,000 units a year, and I gather we're on track to go well above that this year.
Increased supply, but at a cost many renters say they can't afford.
Now, Vancouver's mayor finally weighing in on the story we first broke about a City Hall mistake that cost taxpayers $1.5 million. The money, waivers erroneously given to developer Onni for a project that didn't qualify. After our Tanya Beja revealed the error, the money was returned. And tonight, the mayor explains what's being done to ensure that never happens again.
Vancouver's chief risk officer is questioning 10 city staffers to find out how a developer got a $1.5 million break.
If there's a possibility that something not kosher is going on, you want to make sure that you've got an outside, independent, reputable company that is investigating.
KPMG now joining the investigation, reviewing how the city let Onni off the hook for $1.5 million in construction levies.
We do have both internal and now external auditors looking at our process with waivers to developers to ensure that everything is by the book.
Onni never qualified for a discount because its Charleston development offered market condos, a fact the city confirmed in an email. 1398 Richards is not a Rental 100 project and did not qualify for a DCL waiver. But when Global presented evidence of the waiver, the city manager gave this explanation.
It was a simple mistake. The project, as you said, was not eligible for a waiver, and we weren't intending to give it a waiver, and there was a miscommunication amongst our staff.
Right now, it looks like an isolated incident, and therefore human error was involved. But there's no other evidence of this problem arising, but we want to be sure of that.
The auditors will check all 30 waivers granted under the Rental Housing Incentives Program. They'll also review management, oversight, and the approvals process. Adrian Carr is calling on the city to investigate whether anyone had the authority to overturn council's decision.
You know, there's cities in Canada and around the world that have had issues around corruption. And we have a system here in Vancouver that's, I believe, ripe for that.
The city plans to release its own report later this week. KPMG's will be done in January. Tanya Beja, Global News.
Well, we'll go back to Yvonne for a full weather forecast in a few minutes. But away from the snow in other news tonight, the City of Vancouver has released its report into a story that Global News first brought you about a major developer receiving a $1.5 million break on fees, even though they didn't qualify for it. The report says it was down to miscommunication and a lack of oversight. But as our reporter Tanya Beja, who broke this story, explains, no one can explain why the man who was given the job to oversee this was even questioned.
A report into the $1.5 million mistake looming over City Hall finds no evidence of fraud, but a system plagued by poor oversight.
You know, city staff have been just swamped with activity. You know, when it's that busy, mistakes can happen.
In 2014, the city gave developer Onni a break on construction fees, even though the company didn't qualify. Vancouver's chief risk officer investigated and blamed changing rules and a lack of documentation.
There wasn't double checking happening, but obviously there'll be some further investigation and assessment of this, and we'll know in the end how the mistake was made.
According to the review, an email miscommunication led to the granting of the waiver, but the person responsible retired and was never interviewed.
That does not make sense to me. I'm a business person and that doesn't make sense. You don't make that decision without even actually sitting down and talking to the person that actually did the agreement in the first place.
Why would they protect them? If they've made a mistake, time to say sorry, make recompense, but why hide the identity of this person?
Just saying, oh, it's a mistake, sorry, we should have asked for it, isn't good enough. Should be accountable.
The city manager says more interviews may follow when the city does a full audit of the waiver program in January. That will be reviewed by KPMG. But observers want an outside body to take a harder look.
Something should happen whereby the provincial government appoints someone who is independent of the city.
I think it's good for the confidence of the people to bring in a third party, such as an ombudsman or some other auditor who doesn't have a relationship already with the city.
It's a motion George Affleck will bring to council this week. In the meantime, the chief risk officer made 10 recommendations to prevent a similar mistake from happening again. Tanya Beja, Global News.
A motion calling for more transparency when it comes to dealing with developers in the City of Vancouver unanimously passed this afternoon. Our Tanya Beja is live in Vancouver with the details on this. And Tanya, this follows a story you uncovered that revealed $1 million mistake by the city.
That's right, Chris. Well, Vancouver gave developer Onni a $1.5 million break on construction fees for a downtown project that didn't even qualify. When we confronted the city, officials admitted they made a mistake. They launched their own internal investigation. That wrapped up last week and found that it was an isolated incident and there was no evidence of fraud. But the main person responsible for handing out that waiver, that discount, was never even interviewed as part of the review. Well, today, City Council voted unanimously to call in an independent third party to look into not only this case, but all 30 waivers given under the city's rental housing incentives program.
The public needs complete assurance that nothing has been passed by here in terms of scrutinizing what happened and to make sure it doesn't happen again.
The audit should be done by an organization, a company that doesn't have a current relationship with the city. I think that's important. I hope that's the case. I hope that's how it will be done. I think it's important that that relationship is kept in a distance and that person has no connections and can do a proper investigation.
Now, it's unclear who will lead that investigation. The city is also right now doing its own audit, which will be completed and reviewed by KPMG in January. Chris, back to you.